I'm in Seaham, which is south of Sunderland and east of Durham. And it's pretty windy today. And I'm looking for my ancestor who was one of the first coastguards in England.
And this is him, James Stephenson, aged 50, in Watch Cottage in Easington. And you can see here his occupation was a coastguard. He's on the census with his wife Sarah and 5 of their children. James Stephenson was born in 1790 and died in 1877. And we've got his wife here who was called Sarah Mackey. It's got different spellings. She was born in 1793, died in 1873, and we're going to start by looking at her family. One of her siblings was called Richard, and you can see him here. Born in 1802, died in 1876. He is part of the story we're going to tell. His profile picture is a gravestone. We're going to talk about that in a little while. James and Sarah had a lot of children. Here they are. We are just going to be, in this video, looking at one. That is Jane Stephenson, born in 1816 on Holy Island in Northumberland. You can see she's got 2 husbands on the tree, William Hardy and Joseph Hart. She died in 1898, and it's a story written just after her death that tells us more about our coastguard, James Stephenson, and his family. I'm on the British Newspaper Archive website here, and we have got a newspaper article from the Sunderland Daily Echo and Shipping Gazette from Tuesday the 12th of July 1898. And the article is just here. I've downloaded the page, which you can do with the British Newspaper Archive, and I'm going to read it. 2 remarkable dreams, a story of 60 years ago. The death a few days ago at the age of 83 years of Mrs. Jane Hart, who resided with her daughter at New Seaham Colliery, recalls, says our Seaham Harbour correspondent, the circumstances of the wreck of the Brig Rainbow, which was built at the Pottery Bank, Sunderland. The owners were Messrs. Tanner and Beckwith, the first name being master. The wreck occurred on Friday, January the 1st, 1838. The Rainbow, coal-laden, was returning for shelter, having been in collision on the previous night on the Yorkshire coast, a gale prevailing at the time. She reached the Durham coast, and when off Hawthorn Hive, her battered and disabled condition was observed from the lonely Coastguard station. The Coastguard placed in charge of this station was James Stephenson, but on this day he was attending the funeral of one of his men who had been killed by an accident at Seaham Harbour. He left behind him his wife, Sarah, and his daughter Jane, aged 23 years, who subsequently married a well-known sinker named James Hart. The 2 women were in their watch, joined by Richard Mackey, a brother of Mrs. Stephenson. Mrs. Stephenson had entreated her husband not to go to the funeral, as she had had a dream that a vessel came on shore with a woman's dead body washing about the deck. Mr. Stephenson, however, under the impression that the bad weather was abating, had proceeded on his journey. A few hours after he had gone, the Rainbow hove in sight, which means it came into view. A good lookout had been kept by the little party, and that party was Sarah Stephenson, her daughter Jane, and her brother, Richard Mackey. And seeing that the distressed vessel was heading for the shore, a red cloak belonging to Jane was hoisted on a pole and placed at a point where it was thought safest for the Rainbow to take the ground. Most remarkable to say, the form and rigging of the ship and the scene on deck, the dead woman included, were exactly as Mrs. Stephenson had seen in her dream. Mr. Mackey and the females were unable to do anything to save the crew, but Jane started on a most perilous journey of nearly 4 miles to Seaham Harbour, in the midst of a fierce and almost blinding snowstorm, to obtain assistance. On learning from the young woman what had occurred, a number of pilots, who were mariners who would guide boats, and others mounted a coble, which is a type of fishing vessel, on a wagon, and both were dragged along almost inaccessible roads to Hawthorn. The crew was saved, but the woman, who proved to be Mrs. Tanner, wife of the captain, had died from injury and exposure. Vincent, the cook, had one of his legs shattered in such a way that it had afterwards to be amputated. In following years, Vincent became keeper of Sunderland lighthouse, having been furnished with a wooden leg. Now comes the second dream. When the rescue of the people on board the Rainbow had been effected, Mr. Mackey made his way to Seaham Harbour to seek medical aid, and in doing so he met Mr. Smith, a well-known local practitioner who was going out to Hawthorn with splints, bandages, etc. After Mackey had told the story of the shipwreck to Dr. Smith, the latter said that during the night he had had a dream that a vessel had come on shore, and impelled by the impression made upon his mind, he could not resist going to see if his services were required. And so there we have the story of the Rainbow, told 60 years later by the granddaughter of Sarah at the death of her own daughter Jane. We hear a snapshot of a day in the life of James Stephenson's family as a coastguard, his wife Sarah, and also her brother who was involved in the Coastguard watch at Hawthorn Hive. I've searched on the British Newspaper Archive to see if there is anything from 1838 about this shipwreck of the Rainbow. And there is this newspaper published in Newcastle on Friday the 2nd of March 1838. And if we zoom in here, we've got this part called Marine Intelligence. I'm moving down the page here looking for the Rainbow. And it's actually at the top of the next column. And it's here. This says, the Rainbow of Sunderland became a total wreck near Seaham on the 25th. The crew were taken on shore, much exhausted. Mrs. Tanner, the captain's wife, was in the vessel and perished from wet and cold. The materials are expected to be saved. And we know actually that it was the 25th of the previous month. So that is the 25th of February because this was published in March. And this is a prime example of how some stories get mistold. Because in this 1898 article, this says the wreck occurred on Friday, January the 1st, 1838. But we know it wasn't New Year's Day, 1838. We know it was in February. This is exactly how stories can get passed down from one generation to another in a broken telephone. People not meaning to pass on incorrect information, they've just misremembered it or been told it incorrectly themselves. So just be careful of those stories you might hear and research them yourself and take everything with a bit of a pinch of salt until you find the evidence. Further down in a different column is another story about this disaster. Let's have a look at it now. During the storm on Saturday last, a poor man of the name of Thomas James, seaman belonging to Sunderland, hearing that the Brig Rainbow was driven on shore near to Seaham Harbour, anxious for the safety of a nephew who was on board, set out for Seaham by the sands and had almost reached Seaham when he was overtaken by the surge of a heavy sea, the backsweep of which sucked him into deep water, and he was never seen afterwards. His body has not yet been found. He left a wife and 3 children. While I know the dates of James Stephenson as a coastguard, I don't know much about the stories of what he actually did, and it's little snapshots like this that the newspapers can really help with. And as we can also see from this newspaper, the story involved James, his wife Sarah, his brother-in-law Richard, their daughter Jane, and also the terribly sad story of another person and another family caught up in the disaster and the tragedy that befell them.
I'm on the beach at Seaham, and Hawthorn Hive is about 2.5 miles in that direction. And I'm just thinking about Thomas James, who we know in 1838 in such bad weather set off over the sands trying to find his nephew and see if he was safe in the storm. But of course he sadly died himself on his way when a wave came in and took him out to sea. I don't think his body was ever found. It's only a little bit windy here, but imagine what it would have been like on a freezing winter's day with snow coming down and what that would have been like for him. And imagine his nephew, who we know survived on the ship, must have felt knowing that his uncle had come looking for him to save him and he had died himself. A real sad tale. I'm trying to find my way to St John's Church in Seaham to see if I can find the grave of my ancestors. I know from findagrave that his brother-in-law and his wife are both buried there.
And this is the page on findagrave which shows the gravestone here of Richard Mackey. Died in 1876 in the churchyard of St John the Evangelist in Seaham. And if we look at the stone, we can see Richard Mackey's name at the bottom, and also his wife Sarah is at the bottom too. Sarah was born Sarah Kindred and she died in 1877. This gravestone is incredibly detailed. Look at the ones next to it, which are just flat stones, although they're different dates. This one here has got 2 capitals and columns at the side. Incredible detail all around here. This is a very, very detailed and expensive gravestone.
But I can see from the stone that it's a bit illegible, and I think it might be a shared gravestone for all 4 of them. So I'm going to go and see if getting there nearer and closer up can help me identify it. Oh, and I can see the top of the church. Just peeking out from the top of those roofs. And from the direction of the sea to the direction of the church. And like so many churchyards and graveyards, all the stones have been cleared away at this one and put around the edge of the cemetery. Sometimes they were buried underneath. So there's a big expanse of grass behind me. There's people walking their dogs and playing with their dogs and chatting. So it's a nice common place, but I'm here for the gravestones around the edge. And there is a lot of them, all the way around the edge. And here they are. It's getting a bit dark, so I'm going to try and find the one I've seen on Find a Grave, because I know that's here somewhere. The grave I'm looking for is like a pointed arch, and the top names are eroded, and I can see the bottom names, and I'm looking for Richard Mackey on it. His wife's named underneath, but the top 2 names are illegible, and I'm wondering if they are my ancestors. On some of them you can still clearly see the names, but on others the names are pretty eroded away. Still looking. And I've found it. It's this one here. You can see down the bottom it says Richard Mackey and also his wife Sarah, but the top bit is pretty eroded, and it's more eroded than even the photo. Now if this is a shared stone, it would be for Sarah Stephenson and James Stephenson, and then Sarah's brother Richard Mackey and Sarah at the bottom. You can just see how crumbly all the stone is, especially here where it's just peeling off, and that's going to be gone soon too. Now Sarah Stephenson died in 1873, so if she's here her name should be first on the grave. I'm looking to see if I can make it out, and maybe I can. If you have a look here, there are some letters, and I'm pretty sure that we've got an S, an A, an R, maybe an A there, and maybe an H here. The problem is that even the local historian here, who runs a website on Seaham, says that he doesn't know if transcriptions of these graves were ever made.
If we go back to Find a Grave and look at that photo of the gravestone, here it is. If we zoom in, we can see at the bottom we have got Richard Mackey and Sarah, but let's look at the top part again. This is what we've got. It's so hard to see, isn't it, even here? So this is where I thought it said Sarah. This bit might say in memory of or something like that. And then maybe we've got Sarah, wife of James Stephenson, the death date here. And then in this gap here, maybe James Stephenson's name and death date was written. But at the moment, we just don't know for certain.
even if I can't find their gravestone, even if it existed, what I do know is that James Stephenson, one of the earliest coastguards, and his wife Sarah, who had a premonition in 1838 before that wreck, lies somewhere under my feet in this parish graveyard. And I've really enjoyed finding out more about them. And how else should I end my trip to Seaham by the sea? What else? Fish and chips. Delicious.
Please like this video and subscribe to the channel to find out about more videos on the Stephensons, which will be coming up. You can continue the story with the next episode unedited, or continue finding out more with the edited episode. Or what about watching this new family history story? Click here to subscribe to the channel to find out all about future episodes. Thanks for watching.